All right, so I want to set up some context a little bit more. We talked about it pretty thoroughly yesterday, this idea of temple. I want to layer in some of the context of life in the city of Corinth, yeah, and why that life matters for the series of chapters that we're currently looking at, okay? And I'll highlight a couple of things in chapter 6, and then I've got some material for you to work on in taking a look at what Paul is saying in 1 Corinthians 5, 6, and 7. But in connection to this context that we've been talking about. Yeah? So that means you need to be paying attention to the context. And as you explain the content of what Paul's doing with his letter, understand that it is shaped by and explain the relationship between the context of the world of the city of Corinth and what Paul is telling them. Yes? Very blank stare out there. Mm-hmm. Okay, fair. So you're lost and confused. Mm-hmm. All right, fair. Let's talk some context for a second. I'm going to try it this way. Okay, ready? Are you sure?
Yes. Sure.
I'm confused by it too.
Great.
Yes.
What made you want to keep, like have this? Like the.
Moving on.
What did
Did you ask? Why you
I think he wants to know why I want the chalkboard.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I do want to know that.
Because I like it better than a whiteboard.
Why?
I respect it.
My preference?
Hmm.
I mean, you have to clean a whiteboard,
Okay, so back to this.
I'm thinking about that.
Yesterday we said that one of Paul's primary drivers and the backdrop he's going to set everything up in for the Corinthian letter is the idea temple. And for the Apostle Paul, there's a couple of layers to this. Christians, okay? Christians are God's temple. Okay? Yes, I abbreviate Christians like people abbreviate Christmas. Christians. Christmas. I'm glad you asked. Here's why it's an X.
Question mark, girl.
No.
Expletives.
Oh,
I don't know.
Greek. It's Greek.
Okay.
Christos.
Christos. So the CH in English
Oh.
is the Greek X. Okay.
Where's the IST?
So hold on. The Greek word is Christos. In the first few centuries of the church, one of the symbols for Christianity is the ichthus, the fish, because a lot of the disciples were fishermen, because multiplying bread and fish, whatever. So on like the doorposts of their homes, they would draw the ichthus or etch it into the wood. And it'd be on the inside layer so that you knew, like, hey, if I look up here and I see the ichthus, I know this is a Christian household. But if you don't know to look, you don't pay it any mind. It was one of those ways that Christians could identify each other as they visited cities without being overt and thereby get arrested and executed by the Romans.
Yeah, that's not good.
When Constantine in the 300s becomes a Christian, he's at a battle called the Battle of Milvian Bridge. And the night before the battle, he has a dream. And in that dream, he sees one of the Christian symbols that he's used to seeing. And the Christian symbol that he sees is called the key rho. It's the first two letters, key and rho. Yeah? In the name Christos. This was also a Christian symbol. And he's told in his dream, in this sign, you will conquer. And so he changes the Roman battle standard overnight from the Roman emperor's eagle and whatever else to this. And he wins the battle in a rout, converts to Christianity. And over time, we've just dropped the rho from the key rho, and it's become
X.
a standardized X. Right? So when you see this, and people freak out, oh, no Christ in Christmas. No, shut up. It's right there. It's a historically valid abbreviation because it's based on the symbol that the early Christians took for themselves.
I learned more in this class than I think I've learned all year.
You're welcome.
I literally just said that to Aubrey.
Is that making sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Does that help? So I abbreviate Christians and Christ and that with the key rho all the time.
This 5 minutes in here, learn more.
Let's not compare it to anybody else before we get in trouble.
Okay.
But you know, they know. They'll know.
Let's just, okay, moving on. Does that help?
Yes.
That explain why I keep abbreviating Christians with the X?
Yes.
Like,
Just now realizing.
again, relax when people, no Christ in Christ. No, it's absolutely, it's right there. It's actually more connected to the first century and the first few centuries of Christianity than writing out Christmas. Because in the first few centuries, Christians did this. And they did the ictus, the fish. Because this is the way we could tell who we were without getting our heads chopped off or crucified.
Oh.
Because we needed to know who we were to have this community of faith and to be able to spread the faith. If we all just sort of went public with it, we'd all get executed. Well, that's not going to go very well. Yeah? So it was a don't make a problem where there isn't one. That's how they did it. Okay, moving on. You're welcome for the history lesson. It'll probably come back up in another class you take with mine. It always does. All right, so Paul's primary driver, back to the Corinthian letter. Woo! Okay, Paul's primary driver is this idea of temple. And everything in the letter that he's giving them instructions for like practical Christian life, whether it's sexual behavior or it's how the church worships together or it's roles for men and women as the church is gathered and doing its teaching, it's all set in this context of temple and this kind of appropriateness on the theology that undergirds it in terms of temple. So he says, look, Christians are God's temple. And the next statement is, how we live matters. Why? Because of verses like 6:19 through 20. Don't you know your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, whom you have from God? You are not your own. You were bought with a price. So glorify God in your body. Yeah? And so Paul has this understanding that as God's temple, the body and the soul are the human person. Be clear on this. The biblical witness to this is that you are a body and a soul. You're not a soul stuck in a body. You're not a spirit with a soul and a mind and a set of emotions. You are a body and a soul together. It's a composite, unified, holistic reality. You're both. Tracking? Okay. So then for Paul, if that composite, body and soul, is the temple, the dwelling place of God, what you do with it, body and soul, matters. So the way you live internally, soul, and externally with your body matters because both of those things are supposed to be carrying and conveying and housing the presence of God. Yes? Okay, flip it. The contrast is the city of Corinth. And the contrast that's in mind for the temple of Aphrodite, or for the city of Corinth, in chapters 5 through 7, is the temple of Aphrodite. The temple is the building, not the people. You go to it, and then you depart from it. And so the presence of the god, or the goddess in this case, is confined to the space, right? So you go and meet with her, Aphrodite, and then you leave her presence. But when you leave her presence, you're hoping to take something from her with you, some blessing for the rest of your life. Typically, that involves health for your marriage and fertility for your family. So good marriage and lots of kids. Yeah? Okay. So you're not in the blessed position of being the temple, so you need to carry away with you some set of blessing from the priests and the priestesses. Good? But what you're going there for has to do with the soul or the spirit. And the body doesn't really matter. Yeah? So your conduct with the body is, in a way, kind of irrelevant. Unless it's harming somebody else. You're not supposed to do that. So then what does this mean? It means this. Individuals worshiping in the cult of Aphrodite, and individuals serving in the temple for Aphrodite. If you were going to seek Aphrodite's blessing for your marriage and for your family, then there was a really good chance that you would go to the temple of Aphrodite to meet someone to have sex with. Because this is how you acquired the blessing of Aphrodite. Remember, she's the goddess of love. Okay, and so the temple prostitution, or just the temple services, involved individuals going to the temple, having sex with priests or priestesses or temple prostitutes, and then going home and having sex with their spouses. To take the blessing from Aphrodite they had received in the temple home with them and impart it to the home. Paul says that's not okay. That doesn't work. Because you're both body and soul. Not soul and the body doesn't matter. So what does he say? He says this. Do you not know? The one joined to a prostitute becomes one body with her. As it's written, the two will become one flesh. The body matters. But he who is joined to the Lord becomes one spirit with the Lord. Flee from sexual immorality. Every person who sins, every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but sexual immorality is against his own body. So, do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit? All of this is said in the context of temple. But it's in the contrast of temples and systems of worship that Paul draws his point. You don't go to the temple to acquire something from Aphrodite. You are the temple. If you're coming to Christian faith, but you're used to a system that looks like this, this becomes the problem. Right? Because if I am the soul and it doesn't matter what I do with my body, and Jesus has set me free, then great. My soul is free. The body still doesn't matter. What's Paul's point in 5, 6, and 7? Paul's point is this matters. Because God didn't create us dichotomous. He didn't create us as two separate things. He created us as an integrated thing. And if you in your body are supposed to carry with you the presence of God, then what you do with the body matters. Yeah? That's his point. If that's the case, then he says, sorry guys, there's rules. There's rules. You don't get to do whatever you want with your body. There's rules. Not because God's a killjoy or a curmudgeon, but because your body doesn't belong to you. It's a temple space. And as a temple space, you have two choices. You keep it holy, or you defile it. Because it's supposed to be a holy space. You are not your own. You were bought with a price. If you're not your own, then the one who bought you determines what you do with the temple. So if you want it to be holy, there's rules. Stop going to the temple of Aphrodite. Stop having sex with the temple prostitutes. Stop seeking the blessing and the favor and the whatever from Aphrodite. Because what you do with the body actually matters. This is the context. This is the context that shapes this instruction. And his instruction matters. So here's what he says. In 5, hey, this isn't okay. Not even the pagans are that crazy. In 6, guys, you're the temple. The way you live is supposed to matter because you're supposed to be a holy space. And in 7, all right, this is what it's supposed to look like. Instead of me correcting you for what's gone wrong, let me tell you what it should be like. And what he's trying to do is build out this system that says, if we really are the temple, and if we really are the space where the world around us comes into contact with the true God, then the conduct of our lives and the approach to what and how we live should be different. And it's not about, okay, great, God has set my soul free, so I get to do whatever I want now. That's not biblical freedom. That's pagan license. You have to break that old manner of thinking. But the problem is, you're stuck in that old manner of thinking because it's the way you've been raised. It's the way you've been brought up. It's what you've always thought. I'm walking through the same thing with my foundational doctrines class right now. We're talking about baptism. Doctrines. Every single person in the room for both of my classes thinks baptism is a symbol. And they're having the hardest time getting their heads around theological more than just a symbol. It's intimately connected to this salvation we have. And they can't break loose from their pattern of thinking, just like you're stuck now because I lost you. They're like, wait, no, hold on. It's just this is my point. What Paul's experiencing with the Corinthians as he writes the letter is they're stuck in this pattern of thinking. My soul is free, my body doesn't matter, so my soul is free, I can do whatever I want. Paul goes, no! Because you're not a soul. You're a body and a soul. And if the body houses the presence of God, then we have an obligation to keep it holy. Is this making sense? This is the thought world behind what Paul is saying in 1 Corinthians 5, 6, and 7. Yeah? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at 1 Corinthians 5, 6, and 7. And I want you to link what we've talked about to what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5, 6, and 7. And explain it. I want you to use parts of 5, 6, and 7 to do the explaining. So you should quote stuff from the Corinthian letter, but you should link it to what we've started understanding about what's going on in the city over the last few days. Yeah? Is this making sense? The context drives what Paul says in this letter. If we don't understand what's going on in Corinth, we don't know why he says what he says. Good? Helpful? Go. Yes.
Question is,